Okay, people. So I am joined today by Ruben Pla and Charles de Lauzirika.
Charles de Lauzirika.
Charles de Lauzirika. Okay,
De Lauzirika, correct. It's
boom.
a it's a very unique name, so some people sometimes have trouble with it. But
I'm just so bad with names. I can butcher the simplest of names, so
well,
apologies.
at least we didn't butcher your name, Kevin.
Uh, oh dear. Well, people, these gentlemen are behind new documentary, The Horror Crowd, which yeah. Ruben, you're probably best to explain to the people what the horror crowd is.
Well, you just finished watching it. You told me when we were off camera there, Kevin. And you said you like this. So that's always a good sign. But basically, I'll just and pardon me, Charles, for that you have to hear us again. I know you heard it recently. The summary. I was traveling in the horror circles in Hollywood, Los Angeles, and so forth, and make acting in movies. I'm an actor also, and I was acting in movies. And then I started thinking to myself, maybe I'll just start talking to some of these horror filmmakers and see, what makes them tick, and so forth. So I met up with my buddy Hank Braxton. Told him the idea. He says, "Let's do it. I'll bring in cameras and lights and sound and then we brought in his wife, Ariel Brockfeld, who ended up being my producing partner. And I just started, asking people, do you want to do this? You want to do this? People like Charles here, and they wanted to do it. So actually, Charles came in later because he was out of town, but he did do it. And then they all lined up and answered all the questions, and we found out a lot of interesting things about them, which are in the documentary, which you've seen, so you can, mention anything that jumps out at you, Kevin. And that's how it was. Just started doing it, and got it done real quick. Interviews were less than 2 months, and editing process another year and a half maybe, and then started getting it out to festivals. Got into over 40 festivals, a bunch of awards: best documentary, best horror feature, best direct. That's the trip, and now it's opening. It's releasing September 2nd, next Friday, a week from today, and you can actually right now. You can pre-order it on iTunes, Apple TV at a discount price because of the pre-order scenario. Yeah. So I'm done with the pitch now. Go ahead, Kevin.
I thought it was really interesting on so many different levels, right? Because I think the way you split it up, you're there's kind of chapters, but it doesn't feel like obtrusive in the way that you've done it.
Good.
It seems to flow nicely into these different topics.
I'm glad you noticed that, because that was very intentional. Have it flow from one to the other. Literally, a lot of the times when someone's ending one segment, as I call it, it just leads into, I love Halloween and this and that, and costumes and then so forth. So that's the way I wanted to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, that was great.
Good.
And then I think just the energy, right? It really felt like everyone's energized and really wanted to talk about this stuff. There's sometimes you have conversations and it feels very scripted, they don't maybe want to be there. They're just, but everyone, was really just, G'd up to really talk about these different topics and everything.
Yeah. I'm glad you picked up on that, because that's clearly what happened, because I knew and had worked with almost everybody in this document, over 37 filmmakers that I interviewed, and knew them all, worked with them, good friends with Charles here. And, we were all comfortable, we're sitting there on the sofa and hugging each other, high-fiving each other. I'm in Lynn's backyard with her puppy on her lap, Jessie stroking it. So, things like that. And, sitting on a lovely bench outside a barbecue with Charles here, we're talking, doing the thing. It was just very comfortable. And Charles, what do you think? How'd you feel about doing it as far as that comfort or whatever?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think what's interesting about the documentary is it's such a family affair in a way, even though, it's mostly just crazy friends some who are, in bitter but playful competition with each other. Others that have it's almost like I hate to say it, it's almost like this is incestuous family in a way because everybody's so intertwined and so genetically from the same creative DNA.
That sounds really creepy, Charlie.
Well, we're talking about the horror crowd, so.
Oh, right, forgot. Sorry.
But no, it was just kind of fun to see everybody together that you would often see at parties or barbecues or screenings or whatever, kind of come together for Ruben's documentary and just kind of convey the love they have for the genre, but the love they have for themselves, which is not always perfect. There's dramas, there's this and that, like any group of people, but that's what makes it alive and a vibrant, sort of like examination of creatives, because I think pretty much everybody in the documentary is fiercely creative and fiercely has opinions about things that they'll die on any particular hill that they want to. It's really funny. Everyone's like little fetishes and everyone's little kind of like sub genres and niches that they love to argue over, but again, in very playful ways. It's a lot of fun to be with these people.
Yeah, Charlie is right on the money on that. These people really care about each other, support each other. That's how I got involved with them, helping out Mike Mendez on a promo trailer he was shooting. That's where I met James Wan and met Hank, and all these people one after the other, and they're helping each other. I'm acting in this, he's doing DP on that, she'll do lights on that, makeup on this, and then we all. That's the whole, as you know, in the documentary, that's the crux of it, helping each other out because you never know where it may lead, and it's true. And then what Charles just said about subgenres and so forth, it's totally on the money because it's horror, sci-fi, fantasy. It's not just horror, slasher, chop them up. I mean, Charles here is literally one of the preeminent sci-fi guys I'm going to say the world. I'm not going to say the country. The world. He's done, the Alien. He's done the, T2 behind the scenes feature.
I had nothing to do with T2, Ruben.
I thought you worked on T2.
No,
I thought you did. Okay, I apologize. Well, Alien, Prometheus, though, right?
Sure. A little movie called Blade Runner.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I don't have your resume in front of me. Spider-Man, I know you did that.
I did a few of those, yeah.
Okay. Anyway, I was just saying how great you are at that stuff.
I appreciate it. I don't take credit for something I didn't work on, so that's all.
No. I wish you had corrected me yesterday. I forgot.
Well, you're on a roll. You're on a roll. I can't stop you when you're going.
It's so funny. I guess I associate you with T2 because we discussed it a lot, and then me and Hank talk about this kind of stuff. And I just thought for some reason, but because you know it so well, obviously, you should have done the behind the scenes featurettes on T2.
No comment.
Okay. Yes, Kevin.
I think that is one of the interesting things about horror. The fact that it does transcend all the genres, essentially. You know what I mean? You could have a horror rom-com, a horror fantasy film, sci-fi film, thriller. You know what I mean?
Film noir.
There's all these different things it can dip. And then there's like probably films that people enjoy, like Alien or,
Alien,
Predator and things like that kind of have that horror tilt to it, I feel.
Well, I have to interject right now because obviously it's a big segment on Alien that Charles is right. You were in that Alien segment, right, Charles?
I don't know. You blink and you miss me, but I think I'm in there somewhere. Yeah.
Blink and you miss me. It was you and Cyrus going back and forth talking about Alien, analyzing it and what it's all about. It's a great segment. You just saw it, Kevin, so you know. So Alien's a big one with us, with Charles, me, and a lot of the horror crowd. Because we think it's a horror film. It's a sci-fi horror, but it's horror nonetheless. People think, it's just sci-fi. No, it's like a haunted house in space. There's dark tunnels, and you got Tom Skerritt, Dallas going through the tunnels, and the xenomorph is popping out instead of a ghost. It's a haunted house movie of space for sure. So,
I just my last short film. We were talking about like genre hybrids. My last short film, Love Bite, is actually kind of a political satire set during the zombie apocalypse. Now there are zombies in it, and we got like top-notch, makeup artists to work on it. I mean, because I live pretty close to where they shot The Walking Dead, all seasons of it, all 11 seasons. So a lot of the Walking Dead cast and crew live in this area. So it's when you say, I want to make a little zombie short, it's not too hard to get people who actually worked on Walking Dead to show up and do, bring their A game, right? So it was kind of amusing to me that we had like a really convincing zombie apocalypse
Mm-hmm. You
Oh,
froze.
Did I disappear?
You froze for a moment.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So no, I was just saying that basically it was kind of fun to like have this kind of like top-notch zombie apocalypse microcosm, allowing two characters to talk about like their political views and their views on the world, and just kind of like, you know, talk about things that I think like George Romero would be interested in if he was still around today, because all of his zombie films were not really about the zombies. They were about the times
Mm-hmm.
in which he made those films, about the political climate, the cultural zeitgeist, and all that stuff. I feel like that's what a Romero movie would be. So when I made this short, I thought, what's a good, I don't want to make a zombie movie because I feel like those have been done to death, but no pun intended. But I feel like that, that the commentary is what zombie movies are great for. When you can use that kind of like prism to like blast a message through or an idea through, but using the zombie apocalypse as a background, I think that's really great. So movies like Alien or other genre hybrids where you can kind of like have your cake into two are fun to me. I mean, I think those are the best or the most appealing movies to me, where there's something more than just the artifice of zombies, aliens, you know, whatever. I like it when there's a little bit of extra secret sauce in there.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then Charles is also very prominent in the documentary, talking about George Romero and Night of the Living Dead, and analyzing that, and all the socio-political undertones of that. You know, with the first black lead in a horror movie. Obviously, Sidney Poitier was the first black actor lead, but this is the first black horror lead, and analyzing that, and that's still, and that's like right after Alien, as it follows into each other. It's really interesting. Yeah.
What was really interesting, like, so you have those topics and people talking, but then the way there seems to be this through line with everyone, right? Because everyone has these like similar views on these things, but coming at it from these different angles.
Sure.
So you get these fascinating conversations with everyone dropping their points in, and it's just like, oh shit, like, because I've not seen the George Romero film.
Oh my God, you got to see that, dude.
Oh man, like, it's crazy, right? Because
Night of the Living Dead, come on. Yeah.
You know, is this podcast, the amount of horror films that get sent to me.
Yeah.
Some really great horror films that I've watched.
Yeah.
But I don't like watching a horror film at night. So I do.
Oh, that's interesting. Is that why you watched The Horror Crowd just a little while ago, because you were waiting for the daylight?
Yeah, it's like, it's crazy when, because you have the section where everyone talks about kind of how they got into horror, and just hearing these conversations, be like, oh yeah, my mum bought me it's just like,
it's very funny.
I just remember the first horror films that I watched, and just I just couldn't move. I was frozen because I just turned the TV on. I was probably 6 or something. American Werewolf in London.
Oh, that's a good one.
Then Nightmare on Elm Street a few months later. And I turned the TV on, and those were on. And I'm scared out of my friggin', you know what I mean, shoes.
Yeah.
I'm frozen in a spot, and I'm watching this stuff, and I'm just like, like, I couldn't walk past an alleyway for years.
Because you could see Freddy going like this on the alleyway with his claws. And it's funny, Kevin, that you bring that up, because there was a segment when they talk about the first horror movie, and you got like, you know, Oren Peli saying that, you know, he saw The Exorcist, you know, when he was a little boy, and he was terrified for the rest. It was, you know, childhood. He couldn't watch horror movies, demons, or anything like that. And Lombardo Boyar, a very funny actor who was in Big Ass Spider with us, says, oh yeah, my mom took me to see The Exorcist at age 6. You know, like it was no big deal. And then Stacey Lane Wilson, same thing at age 6. She went to see it. I was terrified. And then Charles, of course, when we get to Alien, he goes, yeah, I went to see Alien, and, you know, I'm watching it like this. I want you to take over, Charles. Tell us that little bit.
No, it was basically my long story short, my mom, you know, was informed that I should not be allowed to watch the film as soon as the guy starts choking, right? The famous chest burster scene. So she, you know, everyone. This is opening night, by the way, in May of 1979 at the Egyptian Theater. So it was packed. Everyone was primed for this film. No one knew what was going to happen. So when the scene starts happening, and my mom was tipped off, be careful, she put her hands over my face, but she was so freaked out that it ended up being very bad. And so I saw the whole scene as an
Love that.
11-year-old, and I was beautifully scarred by that scene for life. But that's my very first horror experience, I guess technically, was Jaws when I was 7. And Jaws is, kind of rides on the line of horror, but also suspense, also adventure. It's like, it's a lot of different things, which is why I love that film so much. But we were waiting in line for Jaws, again, opening weekend in 1975 in June. And there was a line for the screening that we were going to, but the movie was already playing from a previous time. And I couldn't wait. I was 7. So I walked and I opened the door of the theater to look in. And the first thing I saw was that estuary victim, his leg floating to the bottom of the ocean. That was my first image of Jaws when I was 7 years old. So, and I was horrified. I was thrilled. I felt terrible. I felt great. It was kind of like this mixture of emotions that just hit me, and I think that's still why Jaws is my favorite film of all time, because it's
a great film.
It ticks so many boxes on a human emotional checklist that I will always go back to Jaws as my favorite, just because it's it hit me so hard so early.
Well, it's a great film. It's so well written, tightly, it's directed. They made the best of a bad situation with Bruce the Shark not working. It's not working, obviously, and it's a miracle what happened, and it became the biggest blockbuster.
That's why I own one of those barrels.
That's why what? Oh, you own one.
That's why I own one of the yellow barrels the orca barrels from Jaws, because to me that sums up not just a great iconic prop from the movie, but because it symbolizes the ingenuity of the shark's not working. How do we convey horror and terror? You use it by using your audience's imagination, and you just put a little marker, he's down there somewhere. You're not sure where.
It's great.
And so that's why I really went out of my way to find one of the barrels from 1975 from the film, and it was just so that's one of my prized possessions. Is an actual
When did you
barrel
get the barrel? Because I didn't even know you had that. When did you get that?
When did I get it?
Well, when? Yeah, when?
I got it right after I moved to Atlanta. It was around.
Oh, that's what I thought.
2017 or so.
I never saw it at your house. I go, the barrel. We've seen that.
It's only been here. It's only been here.
Oh, that's very cool. Yeah. Near the water in Atlanta.
Yeah.
So Kevin.
Yeah, no, I think that really is a big thing with some films, right? Because in Jaws, you don't see the shark much, right? In the first Alien, you don't see Alien much.
For the first half,
yeah, Predator. And I think you just build that suspense, and it just adds that layer of just friggin' anticipation and fear in the viewer.
Well, it's also the filmmaker. It's not just always a case of the alien looks fake, the shark looks fake, whatever, and you're hiding it. It's also because you are joining the audience in a partnership of storytelling and imagination that I love. I love when you can do that. When you engage an audience, you just don't spoon feed them everything and give them a fully lit CG whatever so that they can see it. It's like you let them. There's nothing more powerful than the human imagination. And I feel like if you engage the audience and you get them on the same page with you in terms of what they're expecting to see, you can do no better. No $200 million movie can match the human imagination in terms of something in the dark, something in the shadows, something under the bed, something in the closet. It's like that to me is what I love about filmmaking. And this is a weird side story. I'll make it really quick, but I was talking to Hans Zimmer, the composer, once, and I was asking him about, how do you feel about that one music cue from The Thin Red Line that gets used in every trailer? Every trailer uses this epic, beautiful, amazing cue. And he says, the thing about that cue is it's only half a good cue. It's really just half a good piece of music. It's the other half the audience brings to it that makes it magical. And that triggered this philosophy in my head of, yes, engage the audience, bring the audience in to your storytelling, and it'll be an accelerant beyond all imaginations. Like you can just come up with anything because the audience is with you. They're working with you to come up with whatever it is you're trying to create that you just don't have the resources or the money or the time or whatever to do. If that makes sense. I don't know.
Sure, absolutely makes sense. Yeah, Adam Robitel talks about that very thing too, about how powerful the imagination is. Like he's watching one of the Insidious ones. I think it was Insidious 3, when the little girl's looking at that dark corner. Oh no, it's Conjuring. Sorry, it was Conjuring, and that universe. And looking at the corner of her bedroom, and it's a black corner, nothing there. She can't see anything. And then, but the look on her face is, the look of terror was more frightening than we had seen any kind of demon or ghost there. So absolutely, the human imagination is more powerful than the visual image. Unless you're going into and you want to see the stabbings, and you want to see the slasher film, then that's different. But I agree 100% with that. Yeah.
Now, from like when you're on a set and there's a scene and that you need to show that fear, how do you get yourself in that place?
Yeah, Charlie, how do you do that?
You're the actor.
I know. I'm just kidding. Hey, you're a pretty good actor. How do you get yourself the script? I work off the words. It's the script. Where I don't mean just dialogue. I mean the script, the story. I have to serve that script. It's not about look at me emoting. I can cry pretty easily if I need to. Emotions, whatever. But I just want to serve the purpose of that of what the writer had in mind and the director. You got to invest yourself. You got to commit yourself. I mean, you can't just go half-ass. You got to really, do it. That's why, luckily, I've worked with the same directors multiple times because they like what I bring. So there it is. I'm sure that's how most actors do it. You just got to commit to it and invest in it. And some people, they use past memories, and some people, sense recall, this and that. To me, I really work off the script. And then I tap in. I find that secret, that little thing where there's, this little kid is suffering and dying, just like, God, what would I, if my kid, this and that. You can use all these kinds of tricks. I've never done this, but I know that there are actors who are like, I need to cry, so I'm going to look at the light. They look at the light, and then that'll make you cry. If you stare at the light, the tear's going to come out. But that's just a very external kind of a technique.
I mean, I think some of the most successful collaborations I've seen come like director-actor relationships are from just good casting. It's like if you have not cast the movie well, it's going to be a pain on set because you might not, the two of you might not have a shared vision for what the movie is, or even a shared understanding of what you guys, what the tasks are for the day. So I think that if you put all your kind of firepower into casting, ideally, when you're on set, you have very little to talk about other than maybe faster, slower, bigger, smaller, louder, more quiet, like just minor adjustments in a perfect world. Because if you're on set and you have to stop everything to have a 10, 15 minute, 20 minute, 30 minute conversation,
motivation,
you're losing the day. You're losing the day so hard because you're talking about motivation and this character's childhood and all these other things that should have been talked about way in advance. I mean, even if you're on a low budget indie and you don't have time for rehearsals, I mean, just go out to dinner before the movie starts production and just talk about it and just get in sync with each other, so that in the same way a director kind of has pre-production conversations with the cinematographer and the costume designer and the production designer, do it with your actors so that on the day it's minor adjustments, it's tweaks, it's nothing, major. And that's those have been the best experiences I've had, when it's just like finessing on the day.
Yeah, if the actor has questions, they should be brought up before you're on the set. I mean, dinner, breakfast, whatever it is, you should just say, I've got these 3 or these 12 questions. What's going on here? Not like, can we stop? Come on, you can't do that. Yeah.
And there might be times when the director doesn't know, and I think it's fair to just be honest and say, you know what, I'm not sure. What do you think? Let's talk this out. Yeah. Because I've also seen situations where the director and the actor are at odds with each other, where they have 2 very opposing ideas, but rather than pout about it and go off into the corner and sulk and be mad, engage that clash, engage that argument, and perhaps a third new idea will pop out of those 2 that neither one of you anticipated, and that's even more magical. So it's like, I don't shy away from arguments. I mean, just don't. Try not to do it on the day of shooting. Try to do it ahead of time, and so that when you're there, you're like, oh, remember that thing we talked about? Let's explore that for a minute.
Yeah, it's happened to me many times when you're like, what's your idea? What's my idea? And you merge them and you make this third idea, which works wonderfully on the day. Yeah. So yes, Kevin.
That makes sense. Like, Charles, for you, do you approach a feature the same as a short film?
No, no. A feature is a marathon, a short is a sprint. So it's kind of like when you get into the rhythm of making a feature, which I've only done once, but I can't wait to do again. It's a slow burn. It's like literally endless decisions that have to be made. endless problems that have to be solved, but it's a much more measured pace, because you realize that even though you have a ton of stuff to do in a short amount of time, and you're racing against the clock, and you're trying not to burn through the budget, it's just, you have to look at it as like, okay, I have to keep my energy level at a certain level so that I can make it to the end, you know. And with my feature Crave that I made, when it was over, I had become addicted to that energy. It's like I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to. I shot in Detroit, and I didn't want to go back to LA. I wanted to keep working, you know, but I couldn't. It's like we had to stop because we were done. But with a short, it's almost the opposite. It's like I feel like let's get it done as fast as possible. And what was really interesting on Love Bite, on the last short I made, was it was the first time where we actually kind of scheduled it to do 2 days of principal photography and then take time off to edit, with allowing for like one more day of shooting. So, and that was amazing. Like that's how I will do it from now on.
I like that.
You have a cut, you know exactly what you're missing, what doesn't work, and you can fix. That's why when you hear these reports in the trades about reshoots on big movies, like, oh, the movie's in trouble, they're doing reshoots. I'm like, no, that's awesome. That means that everyone involved is committed, including the studio who has to pay for it, to making it better. It's like they've seen what they've got, they know what needs to be fixed, and they strategically, surgically target those areas that need help. And I think that's wonderful when you get that chance to go back and polish in shooting rather than trying to make it work entirely in post. So yeah, from now on, I feel like always allow for like a few days. If you're on a feature, a few days of reshoots or pickups or additional photography later after you have a rough cut, so you know exactly what you're going for. I think that's the way to do it.
Yeah, there was an interview with Kevin Feige. Yeah, yes. And because, you know, there's always been this thing of when you hear this reshoot, a film's in trouble, right? And he was talking about, you know, they factor in that they're going to do reshoots. They're going to watch the film and then they factor in time, so then they can go and add elements that
for Marvel, for sure,
bring the best out of the film. And I thought that was really interesting because, yeah, you were always under the perception that reshoots mean bad. But then, you know, after this, you're like, oh, that makes so much sense. You know what I mean? It's a good thing.
Well, you know, it's funny because with the horror crowd, we didn't have any reshoots. But what we did do, I assembled it. It was like cut and looked great. And Charlie had been out of town, but then he came in town for a barbecue for a few days. And we met up at a barbecue, and then I shot him there, and you just integrated his scenes into my existing assembly, and it worked perfectly, especially the Alien and Night of the Living Dead stuff. It's like I had other people talking about that. I go, oh my God, let's just put Charlie in there. And, you know, specifically when Charlie's talking about this whole thing, watching Alien like that, Cyrus, my other buddies, talking about watching Alien like this, and that's intercut. And it's like you think it was planned, but it wasn't. It just
was Cyrus doing this because the movie smelled bad? Was that why he was doing it?
Because it smelled bad. No, because he had it up here. I'm not telling you said that. He's not going to appreciate that. He had it up here, and then he would go like that if he needed to, but he didn't. He just showed me this, you know.
I see. Gotcha.
Bazooka Joe thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, so in the case of this documentary, there's, you know, it integrated perfectly with the additional shoot that we did with Charles. You know.
So was the barbecue all the stuff we see at the very end of the
film? Very good, Kevin. Exactly right.
You irritated me with that. Because it looked like you were having so much fun, and there was all these conversations, but we couldn't hear any of it.
Because we got the credits and the end music rolling. Come on, Kevin. Can't have the conversation during the end credits. They'd be listening to the end credits and not listening to the conversation. Plus, that's my daughter singing in the end credits, Kevin. So we're not gonna. Okay. Thank you very much.
The song.
It was really good.
And it's song, guys.
It's called Scarlet, like, you know, Scarlet Billows, you know, blood. I got to get out of here. You know, it fit. I go, oh my God, it's perfect. Anyway, yes.
If you do a DVD or a Blu-ray or something, you should do like a, you know, outtakes and deleted scenes and like those little barbecue bits. Put that in there.
Oh, that and a bunch of other things I've got. Oh yeah, Kevin doesn't know this. There was 40 hours of footage, Kevin. That I had to cut down to 90 minutes. I mean, 40 hours, a little over 40 hours. And, you know, it's just, so much, but it was like, oh my God, I'll use a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of that. And it just, my first cut was like 3 hours, and I wasn't ever going to make it 3 hours, but I said, let me just, boom. Then 2.5, and then 2, I said, not enough, boom, 90 minutes. So it flies. But a lot of people comment on the pacing is very quick. And of course, some people don't like that fast editing. Some people say, oh my God, I love it because it keeps it moving, it's not boring. Because I don't like documentaries. I'm sorry, but I got to say that when people put the camera on somebody and the guy just talks for 10 minutes straight like this, not for me. Unless it's like, Scorsese or Coppola, something really interesting going on. But I wanted to intercut, especially like I said with Charles and then Cyrus and the Alien and other people talking about comic books, and you got Bria Grant and Ryan Turek talking about comic books and how Bria got involved with horror through comics and then it's just really and Ryan Turek first read Watchmen and it flipped me out. I didn't know what was going on with the penis and the thing and the dead dog and the hooker mother. I mean these again influences on these little kids, and they grew up to be these filmmakers, whether they're writer, director, actors, or journalists. We have Spooky Dan Walker, great journalist, Sean Decker, another great horror journalist. So
that was I thought that bit was really interesting because whenever you integrate the comic book.
Oh, the comic books.
Because what I mean, a lot of times people act like comic books are that dirty secret. When I want to pretend that I don't read comic books. Oh no,
that's for kids.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought because when they talk about it, you'd be like, yeah, of course you can see the connection.
Oh, of course. Right? What's cinematic? The panels are cinematic. That's what storyboards are. Absolutely. That's why when I'm a big comic book guy, like since I was a little boy, and Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, Marvel, DC across the board. It's not like one or the other.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is like a movie. Even when I was a little kid, 6, 7, 8, and then sure enough, you're watching movies, it's like panel. So yeah, absolutely, it's tied into that. There's no question about it.
And where did 90 minutes then? How was that like the sweet spot for you?
That's what it was. It was a sweet. It felt like the sweet spot right there. Go. That's it. I'm not gonna make it 65 minutes or 70 minutes. That's I'm not gonna make it 2.5 hours. It just felt just right at 90. Just a little bit of this, a little bit of that, just enough of this, not too much of that. That's the way. And to me, if you can't tell a good story, whether it's horror, drama, film noir, comedy, in 90 or less, unless you're making The Godfather or whatever, you could do it in 90 or less. Believe me.
I respectfully disagree with that.
And I knew that was coming, Charlie. Go ahead.
What's the saying? A good film is never too short. No, a good film is never too long, and a bad film is never too short.
Okay.
And I think that there's a fighting way, a sweet spot for every project that could be 90 minutes. It could be 3 hours. It could be 10 minutes. I'm not going to say the movie, but I saw a movie recently that would have been an amazing short film. But as a feature, it was kind of like, ugh, man.
So we're not disagreeing then, because I said that if it's something like The Godfather, it could be 3 hours and it'd be fantastic.
No, it doesn't have to be The Godfather. That's the thing. It's like not every film is The Godfather. The Godfather is like rarefied air of top 10 movies of all time, probably,
right?
I've seen 3 hour movies that are like, for instance, I'm not going to go down the list of 3 hour movies that are good, but I just feel like there are plenty of good long movies and there are plenty of terrible long movies. Yeah. But it's like just find the right balance of everything. Yeah, and that's your runtime. When I read about people or I see tweets or whatever, and people are like, no script should be over 100 pages. No movie should be more than 90 minutes. I'm like, maybe not. It's like everything is different. Let a particular story live its life. Let it be the length it needs to be, and that's it.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of semantics, though, because we're not really disagreeing. I never said that no movie should be more than 90 minutes. Only I mentioned The Godfather, but yeah, there's 100 movies that can be,
No, but you said most films should be like 90 or under. And I'm like, well, maybe not. I don't know. Let's just see what the movie is. It could be anything.
Okay.
See, this is the horror crowd. This is us.
I'm not gonna. I don't think we're disagreeing because I did say that.
That's what I'm saying. This is like the geeky discussions that the horror crowd has. It's like you're at a party, at a barbecue, whatever, and we start talking about something, and we could disagree in this kind of weird, strange way where we are actually in agreement, but we find ways to like attack each other. But like again, with love, and it gets us to talk about movies and create in a creative headspace. That's what I love about this group of people. It's like you can have these conversations, and it's not personal, it's not insulting. It's just like, no, let's bicker about this. It's because it's fun to bicker, and I enjoy it. I enjoy talking about like the getting under the hood of all these movies and TV shows and books and things, and like really nitpicking it because it's fun.
I disagree with that. It's not fun. You know what the problem? I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. Anyway, go. Yes, Kevin. What else?
I was just gonna say, but I think that's the thing that really makes this stand out, right? Because again, it felt like you're all enjoying this, right? You have a love and a passion, and it's not just you're there for the paycheck, right? And because I think everyone, you have that tight knit of friends, and you have those sort of conversations where you find yourself going, no, that's not right, and then you're like, hold on, we're agreeing on the thing, but but it's just like you're arguing about a little nuance of something, and that's what I think everyone can kind of understand, can see themselves in that context, and I think that's what really jumps out, right, and makes this so compelling, such a compelling watch.
Oh, good. What was, if I may ask you, what was like some of your favorite moments, or say a segment that you really liked? I'm just curious. I like to ask people to see what worked for you. Any particular segment that you liked a lot, or
well, yeah, as mentioned, I think earlier, when Ernest R. Dickinson is talking about
Romero.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. Because as I said, that I've not seen it, but the way he's just talking about it, it was so fascinating. I say, I really should see this freaking film. Like,
you gotta see it. You gotta see it. Because it's not just Ernest, it's also Charles. And Cyrus, Charles, and Ernest. The three of them are doing this about Night of the Living Dead and Romero. It's one of my favorite segments. Yeah.
It's like the conversation starts, and then you have these different viewpoints coming in with their perception of the same thing, and so it's just like it makes it so compelling, and you're like, oh damn, and then you understand the magnitude of what was done.
Yeah, the impact of that film. I mean, Charles talks about it, the whole thing, how Romero just was bold in what he was doing, and then Ernest comes in and says, yeah, you're casting the first black lead, and then Cyrus talks about the same thing. I was like, this is so cool, I've never seen this before. And then it goes into the whole race relations thing, which Charles addresses it. And so does Ernest and Cyrus. Cyrus goes, and when I was growing up in school, grammar school, all my friends were black, And then we got Jeffrey Reddick, who also comes in, who's African-American. And he's talking about, he lived literally across the bridge from Cyrus, but they didn't know each other. I found that so fascinating. It was like, right across the bridge in Kentucky and Ohio. And then, Jeffrey's talking about, there was racism when I was growing up, but you do what you do. And then Cyrus goes, yeah, I was over here. All my friends are black. I just love that whole mishmash right there.
Yeah. So there was that segment, like the comic book segment.
Yeah, you like that?
When oh good.
Did you like Russell Mulcahy talking about like Highlander and all this stuff?
Oh, but Highlander is what I love. Highlander so much.
Yeah,
I think that is such a great film.
Yeah,
and I always talk about Highlander because you've got Highlander, which is great. Highlander 2, I don't know what happened, and then Highlander 3, right? And I feel a load of times people do a Highlander 3 where they try and revisit something and do it beat for beat, but it doesn't have the same magic. They don't understand what made the original so like powerful and just ingenious.
Yeah, but then you have times when the sequel is better than the original. Star Wars Empire. Not that Star Wars is terrible, but Empire to me, I don't know, but Charlie may disagree. To me is superior to the first one, just in scope and passion, the whole thing. Of course, I'm your father, but
no, Empire is one of I think Empire and now Rogue One. They're my two favorite Star Wars films.
Oh, okay, interesting. And also then you have sequels that are just as good as the first one, but completely different, like Alien and Aliens. Because the first one, as we talked about, is a haunted house movie in space, and the second one is the Marines in space. But they're both fantastic. So what do you think about that, Charles?
I mean, do we have 3 hours to talk about this stuff?
No,
I mean,
because you can do it in 90 minutes, Charles.
you can't. I have the godfather of opinions on this, so it's going to take a while.
No, I know, but you know what I mean about what sometimes the sequels are better than the original or as good in a different way,
Sure.
Anyway, Kevin, what was your next question?
No, actually, I'm not going to mention the movie, but I just had it before this Zoom. I had a very not Zoom, their conversation. I had a very in-depth conversation with a friend of mine about another sequel that follows a beloved classic. That the sequel many people consider to be either better or as good as, but controversially so. And
does it start with a B? The movie?
Maybe.
Yeah.
And we went on and on about how the sequel, while being a beautifully made film, fails as a sequel. It's like it's a great movie, but a bad sequel, right? And that is what I think is interesting with a lot of the films that get discussed as, is the sequel as good as or better than the original? It's like, well, the filmmaker of the sequel might have selfishly made their own amazing movie, but it did not serve as well as a sequel.
Sure.
Like the whole reason of a sequel is to re-enter that world, be reunited with those characters, kind of like figure out what more stories are to tell. Yeah. Versus like a film festival where it's like, oh, here's a second director with a second idea on the same material, and it's very different. By the way, speaking of aliens, like I think the Alien movies, even Resurrection, which I'm not a fan of, is kind of like a fun film festival in a way, because you have very different directors, very different visions, very different corners of that universe. So it is like going to a film festival and seeing like very, a diverse group of visions for these films. Whether they're good or bad is to be argued elsewhere. But I feel like that is fun when you see that kind of like, patchwork of ideas. But then you look at other franchises like, say, Lord of the Rings or Back to the Future, whatever, where it is a tightly knit, trilogy of films. Yeah. So I like the sloppy trilogies. I like the sloppy, series of films where it's kind of like, I mean, you cannot canonically say, oh, this is the gospel of this particular universe, I'm going to protect it. It's like, no, it's a mess, but let's talk about the mess. It's fun to talk about the mess. So there's no bad side to any of these conversations.
The thing with Alien and that whole, series of films is that Ripley is completely different in every film. I mean, in the first one, she starts out who she is, and she becomes braver and so forth. But then the second one, she's this badass. But then later, she's like, in the jail, and then she's a clone, and it's like, all different Ripleys all over the place. Which I found that interesting. That not all the films are great, but I loved her character arc, so to speak. Anyway, yeah.
Like, what do you think about like long franchises? Because you seem to get them a lot in the horror genre, right?
Except for James Bond, that's the longest.
I mean,
which I know Charles loves, as do I.
But come at the end of the last one,
you can't tell people though that some people may not have seen it yet. It's too much of a shock. We can't really say the.
Like, I kind of felt it didn't need to happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it was just like
he changed his martini drink. I couldn't believe it. He had twist, not olives. I just couldn't believe that change at the end. But anyway, don't shake your head, Charlie. I'm an enormous James Bond fan. As I know Charles
I feel like to use a Jaws analogy, I feel like I'm a shark in the water and you're throwing chum in the water, and I'm just like, I'm trying not to take the bait because we'll be here for hours.
No, I'm throwing it like this with my back to you, and then
right.
I turn around and there you are.
We need a bigger interview. But you're right, Kevin, because I mean, there are a lot, especially in the horror genre. There's a lot of long-running franchises. I mean, look at Halloween and how that has reinvented itself and evolved and gone down like kind of like the wrong side streets, but then kind of tried to come back. And it's a very unwieldy franchise, but it's fascinating to me to see. I mean, a lot of people really did not like the last film, Halloween Kills, right? That was called Halloween Kills, Halloween Ends. That's the new
Halloween
trilogy,
Ends
right?
is the last one.
Yeah, and I actually found Kills to be fascinating because it's not, I think, what people are expecting or wanted necessarily, but it took some big swings. Some of those swings were misses, but it tried to do some new stuff, and it had those wonderful 1978 flashback scenes with the actor. They freakishly look like Donald Pleasance, and their voice actor who sounded like Donald Pleasance. To read, I could watch an entire movie of like the 1978 sequences from Halloween Kills. Like that was fantastic. But I appreciate that they took risks. I mean, people are afraid of risk taking. And when you're that deep into a franchise where it's whatever 10 movies or however many films it is, it's like I feel like take risks. Why not? People are gonna the people who see Halloween on the marquee, they're gonna show up no matter what. They're gonna come see it in some form. The people who don't know what Halloween is, they might accidentally stumble in to see it and say, "What was that I just saw?" But it might introduce them to a whole series of movies that they weren't, they weren't even aware of. So this whole notion of being safe to me is what's hurting filmmaking in general, but especially in genre films like horror films. Like take risks. Like horror films are so relatively inexpensive to make. Go for it, man. Try something new and different. I mean, Ruben and I have talked about this before, where it's like if you have a hit horror movie, like say The Conjuring, and you're not part of the Conjuring team, but you're some other filmmaker, but you're thinking, oh man, they made The Conjuring and it was a hit, so I'm going to make my own version of The Conjuring. No, don't do that. Go to other territory that's not been covered and stake your claim there, and then make that your world, and then you might hit gold, and you might have your own franchise, but don't try to copy what you've just seen a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely see that a lot in every genre where people try and think, oh, that's the magic formula. Let me do my own version of that, and it never works.
Yeah. Well, you got people like Ari Aster who just took horror in a whole different direction. We were talking about this yesterday, Charles and I. It's like, that's really, really interesting, unique filmmaking, the things he's done. And I mean, there's other filmmakers too, of course. But and what James Wan did with *Malignant*, way different from *Insidious* and *Conjuring*. That was obviously the film is what it is. It's I don't want to talk about it too much because a lot of people haven't seen it. But that was like people thought, oh, it's going to be another *Insidious* or another *Conjuring*. It's like, no, it isn't. Very, very different, and that's great doing that kind of thing. And then he goes and does the Aquaman, but whatever. Good for him.
Yeah. That obscure little indie movie.
A little indie movie. Well, that's actually the best of both worlds. The guy can do studio films. He's done several. And then he goes and does, I'm going to do *Malignant* and turn horror upside down like I did with *Insidious*. And then when I did it again with *The Conjuring*. So that's really, and I don't want to go on and on about James, but that's exactly what he's done. And you got people like Darren Bousman, who I mentioned this before. He to me, he is a Renaissance man in horror because he'll make, the Saw franchise 4, which he's done. And, that's big, Devil's Carnival and Repo Genetic Opera, these bizarre musical movies, horror movies. People go, what the hell is that? But some people love it. Like my daughter loves Repo Genetic Opera. And he talks about how that he was so influenced in the documentary, The Horror Crowd, he was so influenced by early horror musicals, Rocky Horror and The Apple and Phantom of the Paradise, which I love. And I love Rocky too. But those influenced him to say, yeah, when I grow up, I want to make horror musicals too. And you got Mike Mendez, who makes horror comedies a lot. He does, Big Ass Spider, La Valantula, Don't Kill It. Charles and I were talking yesterday about Don't Kill It. What a hilarious horror movie that is. And Dolph Lundgren is a riot. And Charlie was saying, the audience when you saw it.
I'm sorry, Ruben, you froze there, but what I think you're asking me is about the screening that I went to.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, no, it was great because like I was there to support Mike and to see his new movie, but I wasn't sure what to expect because that's the thing about Mike is that he's very versatile and he's always going for the humor, but you never know from which angle he's going to come at it, right? Sure. With and the first 15 minutes or 20 minutes of Don't Kill It, when I saw it at I think it was the Chinese Theater in Hollywood. It brought the house down. I mean, he hooked the audience so quickly and in such a fun way that you were with it for the rest of it, through the ups and downs and the peaks and valleys of it. You were with it because he just sort of brought you into his world so quickly, but in a fun way. A lot of horror films aren't fun. I think it's easier to make a gruesome, grisly, ugly horror film. It is to do something that engages the audience. And Mike, I think, really did an amazing job of really capturing everyone's, goodwill toward his filmmaking.
Yeah, talking about comedy, Greg Grunberg, who's also in the horror crowd, and in Big Ass Spider, he's the main guy in that. He talks about in the documentary how humor is so important to him. Any movie he's in, any project, TV show, he tries to inject humor, because if it's just like flat and it's all dry and all drama, and he says he tunes out like that. You know, I agree. Sometimes certain parts of the movie are so like, you can't be making jokes or whatever, but you got to inject it somewhere. You got to relieve that audience, because if it's all the audience is like, you got to give them that release, that sense of release, and the humor is a big way of doing it.
I think every single, well, not every single, but most of the big, I gotta
watch that.
Yeah, I gotta watch that. No, I think most of the big classic horror films that I love have a very strong element of humor in it. I mean, Absolutely. The Exorcist has humor in it. The Exorcist 3 has tons of humor in it.
Oh my God.
Dawn of the Dead has tons of humor in it. I mean, it's like all of these. The Shining has humor in it.
Over the place.
It's like all of these films have humor, because you need that to not only let the audience breathe a bit, but to then throw them off guard, so that when you do come back with the scare, it really gets them. That's what. By the way, going back to Jaws. Jaws is brilliant about balancing humor and terror. It's like right when you think it's scary, it gets funny, but then you're caught off guard when it gets scary again.
Yeah.
So like that to me is like the dance you have to play with the
when they're going back and forth, Quint and Hooper, and comparing the scars and the thing, and I hate you, and he's pushing him around, and then the shark jumps out. You're cracking up, and I'm like, oh,
yeah.
100% agree.
And the humor gets you to care about the characters too. That's the other thing. It's like it creates a human connection with these characters, so that when they are in peril, and the killer is right outside the door, or the monster is right outside the door, or whatever, it's like you care about them because you've laughed with them. You've broken bread in a way with those characters, and you worry about them, and that's what great, compelling horror filmmaking is, I believe.
100%.
And don't you think as well, it kind of helps it connect with the audience in a way that it feels realer? Because in real life, there's those serious moments, and then sometimes someone makes a joke, right?
That never happens with me and Charles. Never.
It's straight serious with you guys all the time.
We're quibsters. No, yes, seriously though, yes, 100%. It's more the audience, the people can relate to it, tune in to go, of course. Humor is such an integral part of people's lives. I mean, you can't live a life without any humor.
I kind of felt that's what made Blade the success it was. And when you look at, because I think Blade kind of came out when the comic book films were taking a bit of a slide again, and then Blade came, and I feel Blade invented bullet time, not the Matrix, but Blade came.
Invented what was it? What?
Bullet time.
Bullet time is what you mean?
Bullet time is the effect in the Matrix when Neo is like.
Okay, I was gonna say dodging bullets. Okay, I didn't know it's called bullet time. Interesting. Why bullet time?
I don't know.
Because time warps. Time. Is elastic.
Okay. So it's bullet time warp. Okay, I got it.
but Blade, it was like, it's this zombie vampires and all of this, but then there was a load of laughs in Blade.
Oh sure. Well, he's funny. He's very funny. He's a badass, killer badass, but he's as funny as hell. And then when you got Ryan Reynolds coming in on the next one, forget about it. He's hilarious. He was doing his pre-Deadpool shtick there, literally, and that was hilarious. So yeah, humor.
I believe it was the first time a Marvel character actually got they got it right, because if I'm not mistaken, if I'm getting my Marvel history wrong, the first actual real big studio theatrical Marvel movie was Howard the Duck in 1986.
That's correct, actually. That's correct.
So obviously that was not the best launch for the Marvel brand in big filmmaking. But Blade seemed to be the first one that kind of got it right, or at least right enough that people say, "Oh, this is cool. I want more of it."
People took it seriously. Yeah.
I think Blade was the thing that really kicked off the comic book movie kind of, because then you got X-Men, Spider-Man, and it just all kind of,
I mean, Superman, Chris Reeves, Superman, Richard Donner, that was obviously was before that, but there was a big gap. Don't you agree, Charlie? There was a gap until
I mean, there's Batman in 1989 and all that was huge. Obviously, that was like the biggest movie in the world at the time. So like there were definitely like, you know, milestones before the onslaught of comic book movies that we're still experiencing today. But it was kind of more filmmaker, like I don't want to say auteur, that's a lofty word, but I feel like it was more filmmaker driven. It wasn't franchise driven as it is now, where you do have like a Kevin Feige who oversees everything, you know. But yeah, I definitely think you might be right about Blade being sort of like the first marker of like the modern comic book era.
Yeah,
because now there's no going back. That genie's never going back in that bottle.
Not for a long time, if at all.
Yeah. It is the modern Western. We're gonna have like, you know, decades of comic book movies, you know,
sure,
good, bad, and otherwise, but you know,
yeah.
But by the way, horror to me is an evergreen franchise. Like horror will never go away because it's so easy to reinvent and so easy. I'm not saying it's easy to make the film, but it's easy to conceptually come up with new things for an entire generation of filmmakers and fans to like embrace, discover, learn, you know, evolve with this genre, because horror depends on other genres and other points of view and other perspectives to live. But it does. Everyone can kind of come to horror. Like Ruben and I were talking about this yesterday, was that if you look at really some of the big classic horror movies, those films were the first foray into horror for those directors. So it's like Ridley Scott making Alien, Tobe Hooper making Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Stanley Kubrick making The Shining. It's like you look at some of these, you know, Richard Donner making The Omen. It's like you look at some of these really big, George Romero, Night of the Living Dead. I can keep going. It's like there's so many of these classic horror films, and it was the first horror film that those filmmakers had made. And I think that's fascinating because so many people today feel like, oh, you have to have made horror to make horror. It's like, no, you don't. You can come from any walk of life, any previous genre you've explored, anything that you've done in life can inform a new point of view on horror. And that's why I feel like that genre will never die, because it's kind of got so many different ways that people can enter it and tell a story that we've not seen before. Whereas comic books, you know, it's like, there's a deep bench of comic book characters out there that you can explore and reinvent and sequelize and whatever. But you're not necessarily getting new perspectives on it. You're getting new versions of the same thing that we've seen over and over again. Whereas horror thrives when like new voices come into it, in my opinion.
Very true. I agree with that.
I mean, but yeah, I'd say for the most part, right? I do feel. I do think.
Wait, what?
He disagrees with you, Charlie. See, it's not just you and me. It's okay. Go ahead, Kevin. What?
No, because you know when we had Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, that I thought the first two were great, right? Then they tried to reboot it again with the Amazing Spider-Man. I forget who directed those ones.
Mark Webb.
Yeah,
I worked on both of those. So yeah.
Yes.
So be careful what you say.
So you definitely worked on those two, though, right?
I worked on Raimi's Spider-Man 2 and Mark Webb's Spider-Man Amazing 1 and 2. Yes.
Got it.
No, they were good films, but I think they probably came too soon after the Raimi ones, because I think people didn't maybe accept Garfield as much as Spider-Man.
Yeah, I don't want to digress into Spidey and all that, but by the way, it's Sam Raimi, just so you know, in case you ever talk to him. It's Raimi, not Raimi. Yeah, a lot of people didn't accept Andrew Garfield. I had a problem with him. He's a really good actor, as you and I have discussed, Charles, but he's not the comic book Peter Parker. Peter Parker isn't this cool cat, and you know, he was like the Fonz. Tobey Maguire. Well, he was like the Fonz to me. Tobey Maguire captured that nerdy thing, and definitely, you know, Tom Holland. I mean, he may be the best. You know, Toby Maguire was really good too. But this guy, and I know, Charles, that you like Garfield as an actor, and I do too. But
I think all three of them had very unique takes on the character that I appreciated. I'll just say this: whatever I think of each actor's, you know, reign as Spider-Man, the last one, I think Andrew Garfield was the MVP of that one. I think he was fantastic in this last Spider-Man
Oh no,
he redeemed. He kind of, whatever issues you had with him in his two movies, he redeemed and took the ball even further down the field. It's like it was amazing, no pun intended, that he was able to take a version of Spider-Man that a lot of people might have had issues with, and suddenly make him so endearing and heroic, and you almost you can almost cry at some of his moments.
Yeah.
And
a lot of pathos in that. Yeah.
But that's the thing. I think John Watt came in and brought a different kind of skew on Spider-Man. Like he kind of reinvented that story a little bit and that part of the universe. So I think depending on
that part of the multiverse.
Well, yes, yeah.
Come on, Charlie.
Depending on the director and the scope they're given, I think comic books could do what horror does. But I think you're right. Horror has probably that bigger playing field to be able to mess around and bring us these really crazy
reinvent. Yeah.
But the thing is, like, you can, with comic book movies, you kind of need a brand name comic book character for the most part. Occasionally you get something like RoboCop that's not based on a comic book character, but an existing comic book IP, but is still obviously influenced by comic books.
Mm-hmm.
And yet RoboCop is amazing. And like this beautifully self-contained universe and character and all that, that's a rarity with comic book films. Usually you need someone that you've already read in comic books or has been in previous movies or animation or whatever. Horror, you can roll out any number of new characters and get a fair chance, get a fair shot with the audience. You can have a new slasher with a new mask and a new weapon or whatever it is, but you can keep doing that. And it's embraced. If it's a good movie and it's a good concept and it's compellingly made, people will buy into it. It doesn't need to be Jason or Michael Myers or Freddy Krueger again. It can be, Mr. X or whatever, and he comes in with this thing or her thing, and you think, oh wow, there's a new character, and I'll embrace it. Whereas in comic book movies, you kind of need to be a previously established character for the most part, I believe. And it's a shame because I do believe there are opportunities in comic book movies to do something new, but it's like then the studio's gonna say, well, what's the pre-existing market for this? Who's the audience for this? I'm curious about Stallone's new movie, Samaritan.
I want to see that.
If that connects, because I don't know if it will or not, but if it does, then maybe there's a chance for new comic book characters to, like original comic book characters, to come into the genre or the that world. But again,
the boys
horror is more welcoming of that.
The Boys is a prime example of that. I know it's existing comic book characters, but when people saw that, they go, "What is this?" It's almost like The Watchmen back in the '80s when that came out, the comic book, and later the movie. People go, it was just turning the world upside down, the hero world into these crazy characters. And now the Boys has done it even further. I mean, Samaritan, Highlander, Homelander is a great character. And this guy does an amazing job with it. Was Anthony
Anthony Starr is Homelander, and he's one of the best comic book villains of all time. Of all time. I mean, The Boys is an amazing show.
Yeah, he's great. It's great.
And in many ways, it's kind of the Watchmen show that I wish we got, even though I have to say, Damon Lindelof's Watchmen series was amazing. I was not expecting that at all, because Watchmen, the movie, I had some issues with. I'm a huge fan of the book. And the movie felt like an overly faithful adaptation of the comic book movie, or of the comic book, the original book, the graphic novel. Whereas Lindelof's re-envisioning kind of continuation of the story to me was brilliant. I was not expecting that at all, because Watchmen is tricky, kind of like, it's almost like sacrilegious even to adapt Watchmen, because it's such a holy text of comic books. But The Boys, to me, so brilliantly skewers the genre and modern current events and politics and everything. I mean, The Boys is just wicked in all these amazing ways, and I cannot wait for season 4, which is now filming.
Getting back real quick to The Watchmen, the first movie, it literally, if you watch that movie and you have the comic, the graphic novel, it's frame by frame. It's the storyboard.
Yep.
I mean, not every shot, of course, but there are some shots throwing them out the window. I mean, the dog, so many things you go, oh my God. And he says he did it obviously on purpose. It wasn't by accident, but it works. As I mentioned before, when you're reading a comic book, these panelings, they're like, storyboards. This is a movie. And that's a prime example of that, And Ryan Turek in the Horror Crowd talks about that specific thing, the panels in the images, And so anyway, anything else about the horror crowd you wanted to know, Kevin?
Well, I mean, I think it's just like you're all talking about these different kind of inventions in the horror genre and these different things that motivate you and compel you and brought you in and kept you in. Like, what has been maybe something that's you've seen recently that has been like, oh shit, that's something really different, something new that someone
Charles just saw something.
I did.
Yeah, when you talked about San Diego.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, Prey was fantastic. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know if that is. I mean, it's kind of like, again, it's another genre hybrid. It's sci-fi, horror, action,
historical.
Yeah, sure. Why not? It is. I mean, it's beautiful. It's a beautifully made film because, unlike the other Predator movies, which were very claustrophobic and kind of about kind of creating a pressure cooker environment where you threw the Predator into the mix with these, other people that you kind of hope survive, maybe, if you cared about them. I don't know if I always cared about those characters. They were like cannon fodder, but whatever. Prey, I cared about the characters. I cared about everyone involved, and it was on a big, sprawling, beautiful landscape. And in a way, the Predator was almost like the fish out of water versus being like enjoying, like, to me, the Predators and other movies sort of enjoyed the hunt. They enjoyed the pursuit of what they were doing. They were basically like those assholes who go to Africa and shoot elephants, right? It's like those guys that just like kill to kill. This new Predator was different to me. This new Predator was like a serial killer. Like, this guy was coming to just enjoy the bloodlust of taking down his prey, and found formidable, characters that were survivors that knew how to survive off the land. So anyway, I thought Prey was really beautifully made and a beautiful reinvention of kind of a stale franchise, like a franchise that had potential but kind of like went flat for a while. And now I think the Predator movies could totally be reborn and continue on with this new sort of idea of throw a Predator in a different time period, a different scenario, a different this, a different that.
Medieval times.
What's that?
Medieval times.
Medieval times. I mean, everyone's talking about this should be like a Shogun, kind of feudal Japan story.
Samurai.
Like, that'd be great.
Yeah, that would be like Civil War. There's so many times that yes, you could just so many eras in history. The Egyptians, the Mayans, like Predators, would just be incredible.
Yeah.
With me, as far as a favorite recent movie, it's not as recent as Prey, but it's Hereditary. Ari Aster's Hereditary. To me, I think he just turned the psychological family drama horror genre on its head. And that's very personal to me because the horror of, as I mentioned before, with Burnt Offerings and Oliver Reed and his son in the pool is like, what's more horrifying than you think your dad's about to drown you and his eyes are like this, and then with Hereditary, the father and the mother and the kid and the sister, it's terrifying. It's horrifying. So that one really affected me. I think he's an incredible filmmaker and.
Yeah. And Get Out. We talked about Get Out. I think was really terrific. And again, sort of a breath of fresh air in terms of genre filmmaking and just the idea that it doesn't have to be bloody. It can be psychologically terrifying.
Oh yeah. I love those. Love those.
Yeah. Us. I thought was great, but I think the problem I had with Us, it wasn't with the film, but it was with the trailer. Because I saw the trailer after the film, and I thought it stepped too closely to this big moment in the film, which if you don't
that happens all the time.
I think that. I mean, Charles, what when you've got a film and then you need a trailer, right? What do you think about the way trailers are cut? There's oftentimes there is so much given away in a trailer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, there's this idea that spoiling the film with a trailer is a recent thing. You go back to trailers from the 70s and 80s, and some of them give up the whole movie. I mean, completely give up the whole movie. And I think there are people at the studio and the marketing departments and all that feel like, what good is us making this film if people don't show up to see it? And if giving away some of the secrets of the film get those people into the theater, then we got the money. You know, we got the ticket sales, and suddenly we're you know, in the black and everything's great. I approach it from a point of view of like, look, I don't want to be spoiled. I don't want to see anything in the trailer that ruins the surprise of the movie. But they're preaching to the choir with me. I'm going to go see the movie. If look at those early trailers for the original The Exorcist, where it's literally just the logo and then some like kind of flashes of faces and things. Gives away nothing, tells you virtually nothing about the story. But you see that and you think, that trailer is terrifying. I'm going to go see this movie. I don't know what it's about. I don't know what's going to happen. Like, I wish those trailers could still exist, but they can't. They just can't.
And Alien, they don't give away the alien at all in the trailer.
Well, that's true. That's true.
And then in the trailer.
The second, I'm sorry, Ruben, I couldn't hear you. What? Sorry.
No, I'm saying in the first one, that's what I was talking about. You don't see the alien. That's why it was such a shock when you see it in the movie. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that the less you show, the better. I just don't know if we live in that world anymore. I feel like every studio person is basically, fighting to protect their job. And if a movie comes out and it tanks and everyone looks at you as the one who didn't sell the movie hard enough, you're going to wonder, why didn't I show the alien or the shark or the this or the that? And it sucks. It does. I mean, I wish movies could literally just come out without, I mean, there's an art to trailers where you can get across the idea and the feeling and the vibe and hints of it without going into spoiler territory. But it's very difficult, especially when your film is all about a spoiler. When it's all about a conceptual mystery or a secret that gets revealed in the film. People just don't care anymore. If you say, we've got this great thing in this box that we're going to reveal in the movie, they don't care. It's like, I mean, literally the poster for Gremlins, right? Was the shoebox with the little paws of the gremlin of Gizmo coming out. And it's like, yeah, back in the 80s, that sold plenty. That was great. Like, that's all you needed. Now it'd be like literally the full gremlin out on display.
Sure.
And, with like, sparklers and fireworks and the American flag behind them and all. It'd be like this ridiculous oversell of a movie, But I don't know, man. It's like that last night, Ruben, I was up till like 3 a.m. Zooming with friends, talking about what's wrong with movies today. I wish we could have recorded it because it was this like far-ranging conversation about, is film dead? Like literally, is the art form dead or dying? Is there like only 10 or 20 years left? And it's easy enough for us to say, no, it'll live forever. And I'm thinking, man,
not forever.
In this age of TikTok and TikTok attention spans, I don't know. I really don't know. Sorry to go dark here, but it was a scary conversation last night.
I thought what Netflix did, I think it was 2020 with Fear Street, where they brought all 3 films out in the space of, I think it was like 9 days. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, the different timelines.
Yeah, because I really enjoyed those. They were slasher films, but it was things we've seen before. But I enjoyed the way those stories were told, and the fact that you didn't then have to wait months and months for the next part. I thought that was a nice way of doing things.
Yeah, actually, my friend's daughter was one of the main girls in that, the tough kind of bad girl, Ryan Simpkins, the blonde, and she was great. And I thought the show was, hit or miss, but some of the acting was good in it, as most things are.
But does that go to the point of people prefer to binge entire series or seasons of series now that's kind of what people want to do? Like, they would rather spend, 10 hours over a weekend watching an entire season of something versus watching an installment of a movie 1 year and then the next year and the year after that. Is this kind of a hybrid version of that, where it's kind of like you've got 3 movies ready to go that come out in a short period of time, but it's basically like a glorified TV series?
I think, yeah, kind of. Yeah, I would say kind of. But I think when you've got a great story, right, that's so compelling, like June, you know what I mean? Like, oh my gosh, what Villeneuve did with June was incredible, and I cannot wait for the next one. I'm a bit irritated I got to wait 2 years, but I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go for the next one. And
imagine how irritated you would be if the first film tanked and it said Dune Part 1, and you're like, wait, what? There wasn't. There's no Part 2 now.
I thought they were filming them back to back, and then when I heard, oh no, they filmed the first one, and it wasn't even if it's a success, it had to make that certain level of money to get. And I was just like, oh my god, this needs to work, because it'd be so irritating just to get part one and then that's it.
Well, that's a curse with films that hype a sequel before that film's even come out. If you look at like Buckaroo Banzai, that ends with wait for the next episode, against the World Crime League or whatever. Like they tease the sequel at the end of Buckaroo Banzai, and then there was never that. Young Sherlock Holmes teased the continuing story post credit. That never happened. Remo Williams, The Adventure Begins, and ends. It's like whenever you tee up a sequel with your first film, you're in really dangerous territory. So Dune was pretty ballsy to come out with Dune Part 1 right out of the gate, but they did, and then it paid off.
Now, is there anything that you would really want to see come to horror, or someone try?
You mean it like an existing IP, or what do you mean something? Just like an idea?
An idea-wise.
Gosh, I mean, a lot of
if it's a good idea, I'm sure not going to tell you.
Yeah, that's right, Kevin. And I don't appreciate you trying to get that out of us like that. I mean, there's so many. I mean, again, going back to Hereditary, Prey. This new ideas are always Malignant. That's out there too. It's always happening. These new ideas, and so for me to say, oh, we need one more about this glass, levitating and killing people. I don't know. Come on, Charlie, it's a good idea.
Did you say a glass? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
There's a filmmaker who I wish would do a horror feature, and that's Chris Cunningham. Well, I don't know if you know him, but he directed a couple of music videos for Aphex Twin, like "Come to Daddy," which got banned on MTV because it was so scary. He did a Madonna video, Frozen.
That's scary.
Yeah, no, look up Chris Cunningham. That guy is amazingly talented. He's a genius. He was actually he was one of the creature crew on Alien 3. He was working under a different name than Chris Hulls, but also a very sweet guy. I met him, really nice guy. But he's a genius, that guy, and creates terrifying, nightmarish visuals and edits and sound. The way he melds all that together, I really wish he would make a feature. I don't even know what he's doing now. I feel like he's kind of just disappeared into some like amazing, hopefully amazing rabbit hole where he's doing something incredible that he'll surprise us with one day. But that is the one filmmaker I think horror could desperately use, because he's an incredibly powerful creative force, and does so much on his own. He did that Bjork video, All Is Full of Love, with the two robots.
I love that video. That's incredible.
Guys, he's a genius, and I would love to see him do.
It's interesting that you mentioned that he was did music videos. You said
music videos, commercials, yeah.
I mean, like you obviously, Tony and Ridley Scott, they came out of that. So did Michael Bay, and didn't want to mention them in the same sentence, but there it is. And there's so many different ways you can come as a writer. I know so many screenwriters who became directors, obviously, actors who became directors, and they bring in this different thing with actor director. They really know how to handle an actor and have that shorthand and so forth. Specifically, I'm thinking of like Adam Robitel, who's part of the horror crowd. He was an actor for a long time, and he was like, ready to give up and this and that, and he, done some things. And then he wanted to do, Insidious 4. He'd done Taken Deborah Logan already, but he wanted to do this, take this big step. So luckily the people, Blumhouse knew of Taken Deborah Logan, but they still had a list. So you had to surpass that list. And he brought in a storyboard guy with his last $2,000 and got a whole pitch going and presented, and he got Insidious 4, the last key. And he was an actor who just happened to, say, I'm going this way now. I'm gonna become this director. And that happens with screenwriters and so forth. Like Sean Keller now, who's a screenwriter. He's venturing into directing. Did his first short or second short, And I think it's first short, directing short. You know, people just come at it from all angles, whether, you know, music videos, writing, acting, whatever it is. I love that happens.
I thought that was a great part of the documentary when he was talking about, you know, getting Insidious 4, because
right.
And this is an interesting thing that I've seen, because, you know, when I recorded the review for this, and, you know, you're looking for information, right, to make sure you've got all the cast list and all of that. And I saw someone say that, oh, the documentary doesn't teach you anything. And I was a bit like, firstly, not every documentary needs to teach you anything, but when you listen to the conversations, right, you have these moments when, like Alan's talking, yeah, I took the last $2,000 out the bank and I created this. I mean, that's teaching you something.
That's very inspirational and very much a teaching moment for me.
There's a lot of people that say they want something, but then they're not willing to, you know, commit on themselves, to put everything behind themselves, to go, this is what I want, this is how far I'm prepared to go. And the fact that he did that, right, got a storyboard, went in, showed them everything, that got him the gig, right? And if that doesn't tell you something, I don't like what you're doing.
Yeah, be prepared. You know, when opportunity knocks, it's an old cliche, but you got to be prepared. And real quick, to address what you said, that critic said about it doesn't teach you. Not only does that moment teach you, but I also didn't want to go in there and have this be a tutorial of filmmaking. You know, that wasn't, I had like even more stuff about filmmaking, and I kind of trimmed it out. I wanted to be more what people can find the film accessible, you know, find the horror crowd accessible, and it could relate to not just diehard horror fans or even horror filmmakers, but just the average person who's watching this. As I was talking about the other day, you know, the film was in over 40 festivals, but a third of those were not horror festivals. They were regular, you know, generic festivals. And also won awards against features that weren't horror, and then this one beat it. So it clearly speaks out, and people have spoken to me. Oh my God, this little kid in Scotland, you know, there's not even a movie theater here, but I saw your festival, you know, online, and it really inspired me. I mean, that's all very, you know, inspirational stuff when you hear that. So it doesn't have to be about, I need to hear more. Give me your techniques about filmmaking. Teach me something. I mean, you know, I think it should entertain and teach if you can. Sure, great. But it's not a book, like, you know, a manual. Here, this is how you make films, or this is, you know. Anyway, what do you think, Charlie?
I think that, Ruben, you're going to hate this comparison, but I think your documentary is kind of like, it's like a series of first dates. It's like when you go out with somebody for the first time and you spend a half hour, an hour, 2 hours, just sort of like feeling each other out and talking about, you know, what your origin story is, where you're from, what got you into what you're doing, your take on certain things. But for like, how many people are in this? 30, how many?
37.
37 people. It's like 37 speed dates with horror as like the connective tissue of it all. But like everybody kind of telling their story as to why should I want to hang out with you more, basically.
I think you and I hit it off on our speed date though on that bench though, Charlie. That was
of course, yeah. No, I mean there was a romantic bench under a tree. It was beautiful. It was great.
Well, you couldn't see because it was out of frame, but we were holding hands under the frame. But anyway, yes, go ahead. Please.
TMI. But no, it's like, but it's almost, you could do like the horror crowd, the second date, you know, and it's like, so where do you go from there? And I feel like
the divorce,
yeah,
horror crowd, the divorce.
No, I mean, no, you gotta work up to the third date because that's when it gets really exciting.
Okay.
But no, it's like, I feel like it really is a bunch of people just kind of like trying to tell you who they are in a short period of time, and what they're about, and in so many ways, when you connect with somebody, you find things that you have commonalities. You have you know, you're cut from the same cloth, and you try to focus on those areas. And I think that's what the horror crowd does. It finds the connective tissue that brings all these people together, but also presents to you, the viewer, like, this is why you should want to hang out with this person more.
See, I totally agree with you. I don't disagree at all with that. I agree with that. It's a taste.
Don't disagree with me. Don't disagree with me.
I'm gonna agree. Okay. It's like a taste test. You're taste testing all 37. I mean, not everybody's gonna like, you know, Charles. Not everybody's gonna like Ryan or Bria or Mike. No, but seriously, because we're humans, and when you got 37 freaking humans on there, and they're all talking about, this is why I love what I do, my passion. Some people's gonna go, I hate that guy, or oh, I like him, or oh, she's cool, whatever. How can you have 37 people talking about their lives, their past, their passions, their everything, and I love all 37? That's impossible.
You should make an interactive version of the horror crowd where you swipe right and you swipe left.
You would get a lot of good. Is it right or left when you accept? I've never done it, so I don't know.
I've heard tell that it's right for accept and left for.
So you would get a lot of right swipes, Charlie. I'm sure.
Oh, we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah. So as far as like, oh, I don't like him or her or whatever, this guy annoys me. Yeah, that's right. They're people. They're human. Some are going to annoy you. Whether it's like watch them in a movie or they're your co-workers. You got 20, 30, 40, whatever co-workers. You're going to like every single one? I don't think so. So that's what it is.
But I will say, right, there were certain films that I'd seen and I didn't really enjoy them. But I thought everyone was fascinating the way they talked about, the genre.
Oh, good.
Things they loved. Right, because
yeah.
But it's like not every film is meant to be for me, right?
No, of course not. I mean, you got Mike Mendes talking about seeing The Hills Have Eyes at age 3. That's a very bloody, brutal film, and he's watching because his family took him. There you go. You got Lombardo and Stacy and Oren seeing The Exorcist at age 6. He's watching The Hills Have Eyes at age 3. It's different, but not everybody likes the Hills Have Eyes, or Alien. I mean, God forbid, but or The Shining or whatever. Not everybody's gonna like it, or The Night of the Living Dead. I don't like that. It's black and white. No, literally, So, of course, that's great that you though can enjoy maybe not the movies they're talking about, but how they're talking about them.
Yeah, it's the passion.
Yeah.
Right. Because everyone had that passion. Everyone from a different background, they're coming at things in a different way, but they all have the same passion. And I think that's what's great.
Yeah, I agree 100%. People's reactions to the different movies, Charlie and Cyrus and Ernest Dickerson and Mike and Ryan and everybody thought the Watchmen. You talk about Watchmen, I love that, especially when they're little, when they're young and they're reading the graphic novel, The Watchmen, they're watching Alien, they're watching The Exorcist. I love that because that just kind of like infuses them with the horror, the sci-fi, the fantasy. Real quick, Russell Mulcahy, classic filmmaker, Highlander, Razorback, Resident Evil 3, Extinction. He's, to me, one of the most inspirational moments in the documentary is when he's talking about how he was inspired. When at age 10, he's watching The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, and he watches that Cyclops just come across the beach or on the rock, and he goes, I want to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Every time I see that, even when I watch after 50 something times, I go, oh my God, yes. And how many kids out there at age 7, 10, 12, whatever, are watching a horror movie, sci-fi, whatever it is, and saying, yeah, I want to do that. I think it will continue. Kids will be inspired by things like that. So yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, I did really like those mentions of the I can't pronounce his name.
Ray Harryhausen.
Yes, because I love
Charles de Lauzirika. He'll never forget.
Okay, Ruben, I can't pronounce names.
It's okay. It's okay. No, you're doing great. But he'll never forget your name now, Charlie. So, I'm sorry, you were saying, Ray Harryhausen.
No, it's just Clash of the Titans.
Oh yeah, sure.
Sinbad film.
Sinbad, sure. Yeah.
The Argonauts. I love those films so much.
Jason and the Argonauts. Well, Ryan Turek talks about Jason and the Argonauts. Yeah, that's a great one too. Yeah.
Those mentions and like connecting that with man, I love that.
Well, that's the crux of the movie, right? Ryan Turek talks about Jason and the Argonauts, how his dad had the play set of Jason and the Argonauts. When you move Jason around in a thing, and he goes, and that inspired him. One of the things besides comics and other things. I just thought, yes, I love Jason and the Argonauts and all the Sinbads and all that. But yeah, they each had their thing. They each went in a different way. Darren Bousman talks about, I had these little books of the Mummy and Dracula, and he's holding them up. I've had them since 8th grade and taking them with me. And Mike goes, oh yeah, my Dracula action figure, and I got the Wolfman too. I just think that stuff is fantastic. Seen to the minds of these kids who became these people, these filmmakers, these artists. I think it's very inspirational.
Oh man, it was really great. I really
and on that note, we can.
AJ was, she was right again. She hit me up and said, "You'll want to watch this."
Oh, good.
And
good.
yeah, she was not wrong. So
I'm glad to hear. I'm really happy to hear that. And I just want to the audience out there, one last reminder: you can pre-order The Horror Crowd today on iTunes and Apple TV. It premieres next week from today. But get it now. You get that discount price. That's a pretty good discount. It's like 60%. I'm not joking. 60% off if you pre-order it now. So do that. And thank you, Kevin, for having us. Charles, as always, is like it is our fourth time doing this, I think. Pretty sure. We did one yesterday, two before, one with Mike, one with Bardo. This is our fourth one. So always a blast and always educational. And I don't care that we disagree on some things because we're the horror crowd.
and how can people follow you and keep track of everything you're doing?
Sure. Well, Charles and I are both on Instagram and I'm on Facebook. I don't know if Charles is as often. He's a big Twitter guy. He's on Twitter at Lauzirika. At Lauzirika.
There for easy.
I saw that. Yeah. With me, mostly Instagram and Facebook. I'm on Twitter, but I don't know under my name Ruben Pla, RUBENPLA, or the Horror Crowd at the Horror Crowd. It's also all three on that. Yes, Charlie, you were going to say?
No, I'm on everything. I'm on everything.
Yes, you are.
I'm a social media whore. It's fine.
Well, you got that half right anyway. But anyway, no, stop. I'm
Shots
kidding.
fired.
No. You've never charged. But anyway, I don't know what that means.
The fourth and final interview we do together.
Oh, is it? No, it's not. I love you, Charlie. You know that, buddy. Anyway.
Oh man.
So that's it.
All success with the film, man. I really did enjoy it, and I think Charles is right. You could do another one.
I believe me. That's back here somewhere, and I've been asked that a lot of times. What's the sequel? Horror Crowd 2? I'm thinking maybe the Sci-Fi Crowd, in which Charles here and Rob Meyer Burnett would feature prominently. Maybe that. But to be perfectly serious, depends. Let's see how this does. Where it leads, if any offers come in, if it's more documentary and kind of stuff, yeah, sure. But I also wouldn't mind narrative because I have a lot of narrative scripts I've written, ready to go. So let's see where it goes. Let's see, where it leads. So I don't want to commit to anything.
Outstanding.
Cool.
Well, gentlemen, again, thank you very much. I really appreciate the time. It's been great talking with you.
It's been great talking to you, Kevin. Thank you so much, and thank you, Charlie.
Thank you,
all right.
Ruben.
All the success, all right?
All right.
Okay.
Take care. Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye.